Loyola distinguishes between utopias of reconstruction and utopias of escape, and says, quote, Plato's res publica, which is regarded as the unquestionable ancient example of utopia, the way in which utopia is conceived, starting from Thomas More, belongs to the utopias of reconstruction, page 112. When I was studying utopian literature in college, Plato's Republic was the first work we were asked to explore. And then we were asked to look at More's Utopia from 1516, Description of the Republic of Christianopolis by Johannes Valentinus Andre, 1619, The City of the Sun by Tommaso Campanella, 1602, New Atlantis by Francis Bacon, 1627, Nova Salima, The Ideal City by Samuel Gott, circa 1649, The Law of Freedom in a Platform by Gerard Winstanley, 1652, Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy, 1888, News from Nowhere by William Morris, 1890, Freeland, Social Anticipation by Theodore Herzka, 1891, A Modern Utopia by H.G. Wells, 1905, Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, 1915, on up, of course, to the more contemporary works Walden 2 by B.F. Skinner and Ecotopia by Ernst Kallenbach. There's a lot of them. And as a student dreaming of creating a real utopia, I dutifully purchased every piece of utopian literature I could find in used bookstores in London on the first leg of my Harvard Michael C. Rockefeller Fellowship year, quote, to explore cultures not my own, end quote, packed them into a huge suitcase and took them on an airplane to Borneo so I could spend the year I was in the deep primary rainforest studying orangutan behavior at Harvard's Gunung Palung Research Camp, reading them by kerosene lamp in my hut at night, and trying to figure out how we could make the best elements of this great tradition come true. The horror, the horror. My conclusion was to use biomimicry to design a city with the biodiversity and complexity of a rainforest or coral reef. And I wrote a letter to Professor Skinner at Harvard outlining my hypothesis and received a very warm and encouraging reply from him a few months later. This was in 1985, before we had the internet, and it took 5 weeks each way for letters to get to and from the US. Encouraged by Dr. Skinner's reply, I set about making the realization of utopia my primary life and career goal. What one discovers when one becomes a student of utopia is that people have indeed been thinking about it forever, and may have been thinking about it out loud in ways that used every medium available to them in their time. Shakespeare himself wrote not just tangentially about the quest for utopia, but devoted an entire play to it in 1610, The Tempest, in which shipwrecked Europeans on a tropical island must confront much different ways of seeing the world and living when they encounter Caliban, the local savage, who isn't as savage as Europeans might think. As the SparkNotes website points out, the value of a Western education in being civilized was greatly questioned by indigenous people from the beginning. Quote, Caliban spits out these angry words in response to Miranda's self-satisfied claim in Act 1 that as a savage, he should be grateful for the education she gave him. Caliban implies that he has, in fact, gained nothing of real value from this European education. Given that he has been stripped of all meaningful agency, the only thing he can do with his captor's language is express just how much he despises them. I'll show thee the best springs, I'll pluck thee berries, I'll fish for thee and get thee wood enough. A plague upon the tyrant that I serve. I'll bear him no more sticks, but follow thee, thou wondrous man. Chapter 2, verse 2. Schoolworkhelper.net, a website for helping students analyze texts, puts this reading in context, saying, quote, throughout history, the interaction between civilized people and native islanders has caused confusion and turmoil for cultures. In The Tempest, William Shakespeare portrays the character Caliban as a savage, horrid beast, and as the slave of the Westerner, Prospero. Through Prospero's ownership, Shakespeare views Caliban as a lesser being. Prospero symbolizes the Western power dominating an island and its inhabitants, while Caliban represents the islander who is forcefully controlled by the Westerner. On the surface, Shakespeare's interpretation of Caliban seems racist and stereotypical, but underneath, Caliban represents the falsified image of the Caribbean people.